Ethan was an ordinary beta, yet he was the absolute most effective soothing remedy for Lucas. To treat Lucas' pheromone disorder, his father had paid an exorbitant price to purchase 5 years of Ethan's time. During his ruts, Lucas was like a needy puppy. He would bury his face deep into the crook of Ethan's neck, eagerly breathing in his scent and nuzzling against him, letting out soft, dependent whimpers from his throat, "Baby." But once the vulnerability faded, his words would turn entirely cold. "You're nothing but a tool. Don't think too highly of yourself." That was until the banquet illuminated by dazzling crystal chandeliers. An Omega appeared, one whose pheromone compatibility with Lucas reached a staggering 90%. Ethan turned and walked away into the night, declaring he would take his money and leave for good. Yet, Lucas lost all control, completely tearing the banquet hall apart in a frantic haze. He even injured his own gland, crying as he desperately begged Ethan, "Baby, please come back. I'm a good boy. Please, don't leave me behind." Main text. Behind the expansive walnut desk, Robert sat with half-lidded eyes. The rhythmic tap of his knuckles against the wood echoed through the suffocating silence. A single desk lamp cast a stark, sharp cone of light, stretching the silhouettes of the two guards beside him into long, distorted shadows against the wall. "Ethan, how long have you been with Lucas?" Robert's voice was perfectly smooth, yet the subtle weight of it made the hairs on the back of Ethan's neck stand on end in the dim room. "Almost 5 years." Ethan lowered his gaze. Even though Ethan was a beta, lacking the scent glands of an alpha or omega, he could feel the undeniable heavy presence radiating from the man in charge. It felt almost tangible, like a thick gray mist in the air, making every breath catch in his throat. Robert lifted his gaze, his eyes gleaming with an unquestionable coldness. 5 years. It's time for this to end. You will leave next month. Ethan's brow furrowed, his jawline tightening instantly. "Sir, there are still 6 months left on the contract." "Don't worry, you'll be compensated in full." Robert leaned back in his chair, a condescending smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Or perhaps, you've fallen in love with Lucas and can't bear to leave him?" Ethan's fingers curled tightly by his sides. He swallowed hard, forcing down the sudden, bitter ache rising in his chest. After a tense silence, he simply shook his head. "Thank you," he murmured softly. As he pushed open the heavy, carved mahogany door of the study, the dim sconces in the hallway flickered wildly. The air around him shifted instantly, as if enveloped by a sudden, breathtaking wave of warmth. The shadows and light melted into a rich, glowing amber, washing over Ethan in a gentle but undeniable tide. A second later, a solid, incredibly warm chest pressed against his back, and strong arms wrapped around him in a tight, desperate embrace. "Baby, where did you go? I need you." Lucas buried his chin deep into the crook of Ethan's neck, his massive frame practically melting against him. With every heavy, ragged breath the alpha took, that golden aura around them pulsed with a restless, magnetic energy. Ethan tilted his head back slightly, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He was just an ordinary beta, someone who would blend completely into a crowd. What kind of magic did he possibly hold over this man? "You smell so good, my love." Dissatisfied by Ethan's distraction, Lucas leaned in, his canines pressing deeply and tenderly into the soft skin at the nape of Ethan's neck, right over his faded, inactive gland. Hiss. A sudden rush of overwhelming sensitivity made the corners of Ethan's eyes flush red, blurring his vision with involuntary tears. But before the teardrop could fall, it was met with a rush of intense, burning warmth. Lucas was crying, openly and without restraint. Heavy tears splashed against Ethan's collarbone, catching the dim hallway light like shattered glass. "How can an alpha be such a crybaby?" Ethan murmured, his long lashes fluttering as he half closed his exhausted eyes. Lucas pouted miserably, rubbing his messy hair against Ethan's chest like an oversized puppy. The glowing golden air around them seemed to soften, turning into a misty, comforting warmth. I can't help it. You're just so wonderful. I adore you so much." The constant nuzzling left a tender heat against his skin. Remembering Robert's harsh words from moments ago, a heavy ache settled in Ethan's chest. Driven by a sudden surge of emotion, he grabbed a handful of Lucas' hair, pulling his head back slightly. "Bad dog." Lucas looked up, his deep eyes shimmering with unshed tears, the edges beautifully flushed. Sensing the shift in Ethan's mood, he immediately leaned in, seeking comfort as he eagerly captured Ethan's lips. As their lips moved together, Ethan's chest heaved, his breath completely swept away by the overwhelming tenderness of the kiss. When they finally parted, Lucas gently brushed his lips against the corner of Ethan's mouth, his Adam's apple bobbing. Your good boy." 3 days later, early morning. The soft morning light filtered through the sheer curtains, casting warm golden rays across the bed. Ethan lay on his side, his fingertips tracing the elegant curve of Lucas' nose. "If I leave one day, would you be sad?" Ethan whispered softly. Even in his sleep, the alpha's brows drew together. His arms tightened like ivy, pulling Ethan securely against his chest. Ethan let out a quiet sigh, closing his eyes and allowing sleep to pull him under once more. He wasn't sure how much time had passed when the comforting warmth surrounding him suddenly slipped away, like the ebbing of a tide. Cool air rushed under the blankets. Lingering between dreams and wakefulness, Ethan's eyelashes fluttered, but he kept his eyes closed. A sliver of pale hallway light crept in through the crack of the ajar door. "Please don't worry about it. Hez just a tool for my treatment, nothing to take seriously." Lucas' hushed voice cut through the dead silence of the room. The warmth was instantly drained from the world. A chilling frost, like shadows, seemed to spread across the floorboards from beneath the door. Just a tool. Beneath the covers, Ethan's fingers curled into tight fists, his nails pressing into his palms. His throat bobbed painfully as a bitter sting coated his tongue. He forced his breathing to remain steady, mimicking the gentle rise and fall of sleep. Click. The door shut, yet the soft footsteps didn't fade away. They stopped right next to the bed. A heavy, almost tangible gaze rested upon Ethan's face. It lingered for so long that the morning shadows shifted across the blanket, long enough that Ethan eventually surrendered to the heavy weight of true, exhausted sleep. In the blurry haze of his fading consciousness, a cool, soft touch pressed gently against his forehead. It was fleeting, like a bird's wing brushing against the surface of a calm lake, leaving a subtle ripple before disappearing entirely. That soft touch instantly pulled Ethan back to a deafening night 5 years ago. The club's laser lights sliced frantically through the darkness. In the VIP booth area, the air seemed to distort under an unbearable heat. Everyone scattered like frightened birds, their faces pale, clutching their chests as they fled from an invisible, overwhelming weight. "You go talk to him. Triple pay for tonight." The pale-faced Omega manager shoved Ethan, who was still holding his serving tray, toward the chaos. Ethan stumbled into the center of the visual storm. His slender frame stepped protectively in front of a trembling Omega waiter. "Let's talk this out. Please, just calm down." The surrounding music seemed to vanish in an instant. Lucas' eyes, heavy with exhaustion and intensity, locked onto Ethan. The commanding crimson aura radiating from him felt like an undeniable, crushing force, ready to consume everything in its path. Ethan swallowed hard, his calves trembling uncontrollably. Just as the thought of retreating crossed his mind, the terrified Omega behind him panicked and gave him a sudden push. Crash! Ethan lost his balance, pitching forward, tray and all, straight into Lucas. Ice cubes and amber liquid erupted in mid-air, splashing entirely over Lucas' expensive shirt. Ethan's face collided firmly with a solid, unyielding chest. "I'm done for," Ethan thought, squeezing his eyes shut and hunching his shoulders in anticipation. However, the harsh consequence he expected never came. The suffocating crimson energy that had filled the air miraculously stopped churning the very second Ethan crashed into Lucas' arms. As if instantly soothed, the blinding red light collapsed into countless shimmering specks of warm golden stardust, floating quietly and comfortingly around them. Ethan tremblingly opened one eye. Lucas was staring down at him from inches away, his gaze filled with sheer disbelief. The terrifying intensity in his eyes had been completely replaced by a dazed wonder. "Are you an Omega?" Lucas parted his lips, sounding utterly lost. The next second, amidst a collective gasp from the onlookers, the previously untouchable Alpha buried his face deep into the crook of Ethan's neck. He inhaled deeply, desperately seeking out his scent, like a lost hound finding home. The searing heat of his breath brushed against Ethan's skin, instantly bringing a flush to his neck. "Let go. What's wrong with you?" Ethan struggled frantically, but those iron-strong arms were wrapped securely around his waist, an inescapable anchor. Wrapped tightly in the warm golden stardust, Lucas refused to let go. Instead, he let out a pitiful, heartbreaking whimper. "Please, just let me mark you. Baby? My baby. Who are you calling baby? Don't. I'm a beta. Ah." Instead of getting his triple pay, Ethan received a $5 million contract to become a personal human pacifier. To clear the massive debts left behind by his deadbeat father and to secure a stable future for himself, Ethan touched the still tender mark on his nape and pressed his fingerprint onto the bottom line. Over the past 5 years, he had slowly come to understand the extreme duality within Lucas. When he wasn't suffering from his overwhelming ruts, the high and mighty alpha wouldn't spare him a second glance. But the moment his vulnerability hit, that broad-shouldered, powerful man would track him down with red-rimmed eyes, calling him baby and drowning him in the most searing, tender embraces. Ethan always kept a mental ledger. A handsome guy with 8-pack abs couldn't be kept forever, but $5 million in cold, hard cash would never leave him. Getting to be held by a gorgeous man while getting paid. It was an absolute win-win. When Ethan opened his eyes again, the setting sun outside the window had dyed the pure white sheets a soft, peachy orange. The space beside him was flat and cold. As he walked downstairs, the old butler brought over a bowl of dark ginseng soup at the perfect temperature, along with a plate of delicate peach blossom pastries, smiling warmly. The young master ordered this. "He truly does care about you." "Stop." Ethan rubbed his temples out of sheer reflex, swallowing the bitter broth that left his tongue numb. Care? It was nothing more than routine maintenance for his exclusive medical tool. "Oh, prepared especially for me?" A hand suddenly reached in from the side, popping an entire peach blossom pastry into its mouth. The newcomer's cheeks bulged like a hamster's. It was Noah, Robert's illegitimate son, who wasn't even allowed through the main gates. He was also the only friend Ethan had in this lifeless, suffocating mansion. The two of them curled up on the sofa, playing video games for the entire afternoon. As the colorful lights flashed rapidly across the screen, Ethan, enjoying a rare moment of relaxation, casually mentioned that he would be leaving next month. Noah slammed the pause button. In disbelief, he swiped open a news article and shoved his phone right in front of Ethan's face. On the screen was an Omega with slightly downturned eyes and an incredibly sweet, docile appearance. Oliver, the second son of the Kennedy family. Hez returning from abroad next month. But here is the kicker. Rumor has it his pheromone compatibility with Lucas is a staggering 90%. Noah's expression was exaggerated as he lowered his voice. No wonder the old man is in such a rush to kick you out. Hez already lined up the replacement. Even though Ethan was a beta with absolutely no sensitivity to pheromones, he knew exactly what a 90% match meant at the top of the food chain. It meant undeniable devotion and a match made in heaven. That's great for him. Ethan pushed the phone away, his face completely blank. Noah's mouth twitched. Bro, even taking care of a dog builds some attachment. Don't force yourself to act like you don't care. Ethan laughed and waved him off. I do have some feelings for him, sure, but my feelings for $5 million run a whole lot deeper. Noah let out a subtle sigh of relief. He suddenly leaned forward, his warm breath brushing flirtatiously against the edge of Ethan's ear. So, once you're finally free, want to consider me? Consider what? A voice as cold as absolute zero sliced through the air like a blade, instantly shattering the relaxed atmosphere. At the entryway, Lucas stood still wearing his overcoat. As he stepped inside, the soft, golden haze of the sunset was instantly swallowed by an overwhelmingly dominant wave of dark gold. The thick magnetic aura churned fiercely in the air, an immense, unyielding presence that mercilessly crushed and pushed back the faint, pale light surrounding Noah. Lucas strode across the carpet. He shot a condescending glare at the crumb-covered table before locking his deep, intense gaze onto Ethan, his jawline tense and sharp. Come upstairs. Without sparing Noah a single glance, he turned and walked up the stairs. Ethan hurried away from Noah and had barely reached his bedroom door when, before he could even process the sight inside, You A large, distinctively sculpted hand firmly grasped his wrist. The world spun in a dizzying blur before Ethan found his back pressed securely against the cool wall. A tempest of fervent, overwhelming kisses rained down on him, completely stealing his breath. The hallway lights flickered frantically. A rich, dark, golden aura surged like molten amber, sweeping up the walls and seamlessly sealing off any escape. It wrapped the two of them in a breathtaking, inescapable cocoon of intoxicating warmth. His mind hazy from the breathless kisses, Ethan pressed his hands against the man's solid chest. Panting softly as he finally caught a moment of air, a physiological flush kissed the corners of his eyes. Your rut is back? Didn't it just end yesterday? The man's long eyelashes trembled violently. His Adam's apple bobbed as a low, hoarse yeah escaped his lips. The very next second, Ethan was swept off his feet and gently but firmly tossed into the plush bedding. Before he could even push himself up, a heavy, burning body was pressing down over him, nuzzling urgently and restlessly into the crook of his neck. Canines pressed possessively into his faded gland with a deliberate nip, sending a sharp, breathless thrill through him. Lucas buried his face deep into Ethan's neck, his breathing heavy and ragged. The dark golden aura around them pulsed with a restless magnetic energy, as if it were frantically washing away and banishing any trace of the outside world that didn't belong to the two of them. Other alphas throw off my senses. It's all his fault. He sounded just like a wronged child seeking comfort. Seeing the alpha in such a fragile, dependent state melted Ethan's defenses entirely. He softly threaded his fingers through Lucas' hair, petting him to soothe his nerves. I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention. I won't let him into your space next time, okay? And he can't touch what's mine, the muffled voice grumbled against him. Yet, the arms wrapped around Ethan tightened like iron bands, pulling him so flush against the alpha's chest it felt as if Lucas wanted to merge their very souls. Okay, Ethan smiled, yielding easily. But he didn't see it. The seemingly docile, oversized puppy currently burying his face in Ethan's chest was slowly opening his eyes. In those depths, there was absolutely none of the misty, tearful confusion of his usual ruts. Instead, there was only a chilling, absolute clarity and commanding dominance. The restless, churning golden aura around them simultaneously stilled in a terrifyingly quiet way, weaving itself into a seamless, inescapable net of quiet possessiveness, lying in wait. The crystal chandeliers cast a brilliant, frosty shower of fragmented light, slicing through the glamorous banquet hall filled with elegantly dressed guests. Lucas, striking in a bespoke black suit, stood with a cool, unapproachable expression. Without question, he was the absolute center of the room's attention. And standing right beside him was the fair, delicate Oliver. Ethan, holding a small chocolate almond tart, remained hidden in the shadows of the second-floor staircase. He watched the two of them quietly, then lowered his head to take a bite of the pastry. Tode's almonds were so bitter, they left the back of his tongue numb. So, you're Ethan? A voice carrying an undeniable, sugary sweetness rang out in front of him. Ethan looked up. The once clear air had suddenly filled with a shimmering pearl, pink stardust. It carried the undeniable, haughty presence of a high-tier Omega, pressing toward Ethan with a passive, aggressive weight. Oliver had appeared at the bottom of the stairs, raking a highly critical gaze up and down his figure. Spotting a slightly comical crumb of cake near the corner of Ethan's mouth, Oliver let out an unconcealed scoff. So you're just a beta. Following his disdain, that layer of pink stardust swelled arrogantly in the air. Ethan stared at him, his face perfectly blank. Just as he prepared to turn and walk away, his back bumped directly into a firm, searing, hot chest. Boom! An overwhelming, fiercely protective surge of dark golden energy swept out from behind Ethan without warning. Like an invisible, heavy blade, it effortlessly shattered the encroaching pink stardust into nothingness. Lucas lowered his gaze, his broad hand naturally cupping Ethan's cheek. With a gentle stroke of his rough thumb, he wiped away the smudge of cream from the corner of Ethan's mouth. Lucas' grandmother is calling us. Oliver's smile froze for a fraction of a second. Braving the suffocating pressure of that dark golden aura, he carefully tugged at the cuff of Lucas' sleeve. Lucas frowned slightly, his gaze following the direction to the second-floor balcony. where Robert stood looking down at them with an icy, calculating glare glinting off his glasses. Showing perfect tact, Ethan took 2 steps backward, voluntarily removing himself from the warm, protective embrace of that dark golden halo. Oliver raised an eyebrow at Ethan in a subtle provocation and looped his arm through Lucas. Lucas' expression darkened, his jawline tight, but in the end, he didn't push the Omega away. He merely looked past the crowd, his gaze pinning Ethan with a deep, complex intensity. Don't wander off. Ethan stood quietly in place, offering no response. The surrounding gazes, some prying, some mocking, swept over him like searchlights. Meeting Robert's cold stare from the floor above, he simply turned and retreated deeper into the shadows. Without packing a single piece of luggage, a black sedan whisked Ethan away to the airport under the cover of night. What should have been a heavily congested evening rush hour was surprisingly clear. Outside the car window, the city's vibrant, flowing neon lights washed rapidly over Ethan's pale face in an endless alternating stream. Bzz, bzz, the phone resting on his knees vibrated frantically. Noah and Lucas' names flashed across the screen in rapid succession, mimicking the desperate, erratic rhythm of a failing heartbeat. After a long, suffocating silence, Ethan finally answered Noah's call. "Baby, where did you go?" Lucas' hoarse, panic-stricken voice crashed into the quiet of the car. "Why didn't you tell me? Why aren't you saying anything? Are you mad at me? I won't let him touch me again, I swear. I've already washed my hands. Did you go home? I'm coming back to find you right now." The roar of a car engine echoed through the receiver. Ethan could easily picture the tall alpha, eyes red, rimmed, caught in an overwhelming storm of desperation. Ethan took a deep breath, his fingernails digging fiercely into his palms to force his trembling voice to steady. "Your rut has started. Don't drive anywhere. Find a room and stay put." The engine's roar on the other end of the line ceased instantly. "Okay, I'm out of the car. Baby, are you coming back for me?" The alpha's voice became incredibly docile in a split second, like a loyal dog waiting patiently in the rain. The pale light of a street lamp swept across Ethan's eyes, revealing a gaze completely emptied of light. "You know as well as I do. I'm just a temporary remedy arranged by Mr. Robert. I can't truly heal you." Ethan's Adam's apple bobbed painfully, but he made sure to enunciate every single word with absolute clarity. "Now that you have Oliver, you won't have to suffer anymore. Our contract ends here. I have to go now. Goodbye." Without giving the other man a single moment to breathe or reply, Ethan abruptly pressed end. The car plunged back into dead silence, leaving only the sound of the wind rushing past the windows. Midnight, the departure lounge of a foreign airport. The phone screen cast a pale glow over Ethan's calm face. Noah's messages popped up relentlessly, like a rapid fire barrage. He snatched my phone and ran. Then he came back and turned the banquet hall completely upside down. He lashed out and shoved Oliver completely out of the way. His emotions overloaded his gland, and he just collapsed. The ambulance just rushed him away. "Are you really never coming back?" Ethan's fingertips hovered over the screen for 2 long seconds. Then, his face devoid of emotion, he pulled out the SIM card and pressed his hands together. Snap! The plastic chip broke cleanly in half, sliding down the cold metal wall of the trash can and disappearing into the darkness. Early autumn on a university campus. Sunlight filtered through the overlapping layers of sycamore leaves, scattering warm, dappled golden light across the pathways. It was a pure, natural warmth, entirely different from those overwhelming, restless golden auras born of pheromones. Carrying a thick stack of textbooks, Ethan walked among the crowd. Though his steps were slightly hesitant, and though he occasionally had to scratch the back of his head with a bashful smile when he couldn't quite catch the younger students' jokes, there was a light, incredibly soft smile resting on his lips. He looked up, squinting slightly against the brilliant sunlight, and took a deep breath of the perfectly ordinary, yet indescribably free air. Late at night on a quiet street, a cold breeze swept up the fallen leaves. A towering alpha leaned heavily onto Ethan's shoulder, bawling like a broken record. "You just said you liked me a few days ago. Why are we breaking up? Do you even love me at all?" Ethan rolled his eyes, practically crushed under the weight. Desperate to avoid angry neighbors throwing water out their windows, he patted John's back like he was dusting a sack of flour, offering a completely perfunctory response. Yes, I love you. I love you, like a mouse loves cheese. Really? John stopped crying instantly, his unfocused eyes lighting up with a sneaky puppy-like hope. Just as Ethan was about to shove his dramatically heartbroken roommate away, he suddenly froze. In the deep shadows at the corner of the street, just beyond the reach of the street lamp, parked a sleek, elongated luxury car, its license plate concealed by the night. It was an incredibly familiar, breathtaking presence. Ethan's breath hitched for a fraction of a second before he pulled a self-deprecating smirk. Just my anxiety acting up again, he thought. Now I'm seeing him everywhere. Showing absolutely no mercy, he clamped a hand over John's mouth and dragged his heavy roommate toward their apartment building like a sack of potatoes. 3 years later, the familiar city, inside a high-rise office building. As it turned out, Ethan had inherited at least a tiny bit of his father's gambling streak. By signing this lucrative employment contract, he was betting heavily that this city was vast enough, so unimaginably large that he would never cross paths with anyone from his past again. The new CEO is absolutely an S-rank alpha. Just one look, and even a beta would go weak in the knees. The Omega at the neighboring desk chattered endlessly, eyes practically sparkling. Ding! The elevator doors glided open smoothly. The office floor, which had been buzzing with casual gossip just a second ago, plunged into instantaneous pin-drop silence. With the opening of the doors, a deeply cold, overwhelmingly powerful wave of dark golden energy swept across the entire floor like a silent, inescapable tide. Even the potted plants on the desks seemed to tremble slightly under the weight of that invisible, magnetic presence. The polite, professional smile on Ethan's lips completely froze. Those bottomless, pitch black eyes pierced straight through the crowd, locking onto him with a flawless, breathtaking intensity. In the 3 years they had been apart, the youthful softness of Lucas' features had entirely vanished, leaving behind a jawline as sharp and unyielding as sculpted marble. That deeply familiar, dark golden aura surged forward, an undeniable pull that instantly swept away the air from Ethan's lungs. The frosted glass door of the CEO's office glided open. Wearing a perfectly practiced, professional smile, Ethan kept his back ramrod straight. Mr. Lucas, you asked to see me. Lucas stood by the floor, 2 ceiling windows, his expression strikingly dark and unreadable. He closed the distance step by step, his towering frame completely eclipsing the overhead lights. With every inch he advanced, the dark golden aura surrounding him began to churn and pulse restlessly, surging with an overwhelming, almost heartbreaking intensity. Ethan swallowed hard. His mind raced with rapid calculations. If he tries to unfairly fire me, I am absolutely suing for emotional distress and maximum severance. Yet, in the very next second, that immensely powerful presence simply collapsed forward. Baby. Ethan's entire body went rigid. With an incredibly needy, heartbreakingly awkward posture, Lucas buried himself seamlessly into the crook of Ethan's neck. He nuzzled his soft hair against Ethan's cheek, melting against him completely. Please refrain from workplace harassment, Ethan blurted out, his brain entirely short-circuiting. The man in his arms suddenly froze. Lucas lifted his head, his eyes beautifully flushed with deep emotion. He gently but firmly caught Ethan's wrists. Giving him no chance to retreat, he dipped his head and captured Ethan's lips in a breathtaking kiss. It was a kiss driven by sheer, desperate longing, an all-consuming need. Their lips tangled in a dizzying, deeply emotional exchange until Ethan grew breathless, his fingertips trembling as a soft, involuntary shine gathered at the corners of his eyes. Only then did Lucas finally pull back, panting softly. Your kissing skills have gotten rusty. Lucas' thumb brushed possessively across Ethan's flushed lips, a dark, consuming jealousy burning in his eyes. It seems your ex-boyfriend wasn't much of a teacher. Ethan gasped for air, looking utterly bewildered. Ex? What? Liar. Lucas gritted his teeth, his voice breaking. You only ever said you liked me, but you told that alpha you loved him. You went on late, night walks together, strolling down the streets. You never did any of those romantic things with me. Looking at the intensely jealous, trembling alpha before him, Ethan fell silent for a few seconds before speaking, his voice cool. Didn't you always just treat me as a tool? A tool doesn't have those kinds of obligations. Those words landed like a devastating blow. The dominant, restless aura filling the room instantly deflated, like a pierced balloon, shriveling into broken, sorrowful specks of dull light. The once untouchable alpha suddenly let his shoulders slump in utter defeat. I'm sorry. I didn't. I never, ever treated you as just a tool. Lucas incoherently grasped Ethan's hand, pressing it desperately against his own cheek. Scalding tears slipped down his sharp jawline and splashed onto their intertwined fingers. I thought you were a test sent by the old man at first. But then I grew so terrified of losing you. If he ever found out that I couldn't survive without you, he would have taken you away forever. I had to pretend I didn't care. Whether it was Noah or that John, I've been going insane with jealousy. Why couldn't you just be mine completely? Trembling, Lucas lowered his head, resting his forehead gently against Ethan's. The sorrowful remnants of his aura transformed into fine, delicate stardust, almost like a quiet, desperate plea, softly wrapping around Ethan's fingertips. Please, Ethan, just love me back. Even just a little bit. Please? Ethan's ears were ringing. He stared at the tear-streaked face mere inches from his own. His fingers twitched slightly, and after a long silence, he spoke, his voice dry. Your rut. It started. In the end, Lucas never got his answer before the emergency medical team arrived to escort him to a secure resting room. As he was led away, his head hung low, and even the messy strands of his hair seemed to radiate an incredibly heartbreaking sense of vulnerability. Late that night, the wind picked up. Wrapping his coat tightly around himself, Ethan jogged all the way back to his apartment, finally putting an end to this absurd, chaotic day. He collapsed heavily into his soft mattress, closing his eyes in sheer exhaustion. Although he had absorbed far too much unbelievable information, and his future still felt like a tangled mess, something in his dreams that night seemed to quietly melt away all the heavy burdens and past grievances. In his dreams, there was no oppressive, high, and mighty presence. There was only a top-tier alpha, sporting a pair of fluffy dog ears, wagging his tail frantically while following him around in pitiful circles. Just give me a little bit of love, Ethan. Just a tiny bit of love. The cold morning mist had yet to fade. Ethan pushed open the front door of his apartment building, only to stop dead in his tracks. Crouched at the bottom of the steps was a towering figure. Lucas was curled up miserably, his eyes heavily bloodshot and his cheeks flushed with an unhealthy fever. While he didn't actually have puppy ears, the dark golden aura around him, usually so dominant and overwhelming, now seemed utterly frozen. It clung weakly and pitifully to the concrete ground, giving off a faint, intermittent flicker. What are you doing here? At the sound of Ethan's voice, the alpha jerked his head up. His throat sounded as rough as sandpaper when he spoke. Waiting for your answer. Ethan let out a silent curse. Staying outside in the freezing wind all night during a rut. Is he out of his mind? In the backseat of the taxi, a feverish Lucas clung to Ethan like sweet, stubborn taffy. His burning body heat seeped continuously through their clothes. His restless fingertips roamed aimlessly around Ethan's waist, while his head nuzzled desperately into Ethan's neck. The cramped air inside the car slightly distorted from his out-of-control temperature, manifesting into a few restless threads of deep, glowing warmth that made the skin tingle. Your ansvo, Lucas rasped out, still stubbornly trying to ask. Answer my ass. If you don't stop squirming, I'm throwing you out the window. Ethan gritted his teeth, firmly pressing a hand against the back of Lucas' head to keep him still. The fierce alpha instantly retracted all his intensity. He obediently buried his head deeper, and even those restless threads of glowing warmth shrank back in a timid, pitiful display. Dragging him all the way back to that familiar hillside villa was no small feat. Faced with a deliriously feverish Lucas who absolutely refused to let go of Ethan's wrist, the old butler took a half-step back, maintaining a perfect, polite smile. No one else is allowed in the young master's room. Previously, when Mr. Oliver tried to use his pheromones to forcefully induce him, the young master dealt with him quite severely and threw him out. But Mr. Ethan, The young master would be overjoyed to have you inside. Ethan let out a soft, amused huff, resigning himself to his fate as he half carried the heavy, burning body into the bedroom. The room's layout hadn't changed a single bit in the 4 years had been gone. It wasn't until Ethan had finally settled Lucas into the bed and pulled open the slightly ajar nightstand drawer. A harsh, cold glint caught his eye. The drawer was crammed full of the highest grade suppressants, and discarded empty glass vials were piled messily in the wastebasket. Ethan's pupils shrank, his fingertips giving a violent tremble. The doctors had explicitly warned that continuing to use suppressants of this intensity would permanently destroy his health. Out in the hallway, the old butler quietly handed him a dust-covered photo album. Turning to the first page, sunlight spilled across a lush green lawn. A 4 or 5-year-old, Lucas was smiling so brightly his dimples showed, holding a golden retriever puppy tightly in his arms. It was the purest, warmest hue of a happy childhood. Turning to the second page, set against the cold backdrop of the study, a teenage Lucas stood beside Robert, his face entirely devoid of emotion. The golden retriever was gone, and the photo's color palette had faded into a lifeless, oppressive gray. That golden retriever was named Charlie. Later, the master had him taken away forever. The butler's voice was incredibly soft. Boom. Ethan felt as if something had violently shattered in his mind. He gripped the edge of the album so tightly that his fingertips turned white. Suddenly, everything made sense. He finally understood why this top-tier alpha always pushed him away with such coldness and biting words when he was sober, and why he only dared to hold him tightly and cry during the haze of his ruts. Because in this suffocating family, if Lucas showed even the slightest hint of affection for something, Robert would ensure it was completely and utterly ruined. Ethan pushed open the bedroom door and walked straight to the bedside. Watching Lucas toss and turn in a deeply restless sleep, Ethan took a deep breath. He took off his coat, lifted the edge of the blanket, and without a second of hesitation, slipped into the searing, hot bed. Almost instantly, driven entirely by instinct, Lucas locked him tightly in his arms. His dry, chapped lips blindly sought Ethan out, pressing messy kisses all over his face until he tasted something salty. "Baby, why are you crying?" The alpha, still lingering in a feverish haze, used his rough thumb to clumsily and frantically wipe the corners of Ethan's eyes. His voice was laced with pure panic, and even the lingering dark golden aura around them flickered faintly, letting out a sorrowful thrum. "Don't cry, my sweet. Is it because of me? I'm not forcing you to make a choice. If you haven't forgiven me yet, I can wait. I can court you all over again." The rest of his words were completely sealed away by Ethan tilting his head up and capturing his lips. As their lips met, their breaths intertwined in a sudden, breathtaking rush. Ethan rested his forehead against Lucas, his eyes shining with absolute resolve and overwhelming tenderness. "You've waited long enough. No need to court me anymore. I love you too, Lucas." The air went absolutely still for a second. The alpha stared at him in a daze, his pupils contracting sharply in the dim light. 1 second. 2 seconds. Boom. The dark, golden energy that had been suppressed for 4 agonizing years finally erupted like a breathtaking supernova. The once silent room was instantly flooded with a brilliant, scorching golden radiance. The light and shadows transformed into a tangible, passionate tide, wrapping the two of them in a secure, unbreakable embrace. Lucas' arms tightened abruptly, as if he wanted to meld Ethan directly into his very soul. Breathing incredibly heavily, he buried his face deep into the crook of Ethan's neck. His voice trembled with overwhelming excitement and deep devotion. "Do you know what it means to say something like that to an alpha in his rut?" Feeling the terrifying, powerful tension radiating from the alpha's muscles, Ethan's eyes curved slightly at the corners. He let out a soft laugh and leaned up to meet him. "Not entirely sure. Why don't you show me?" Searing beads of sweat slipped down Lucas' tense abdominal muscles, splashing onto the pure white sheets. The wild, dark golden aura in the room slowly transformed, sinking with their rapid, shallow breaths. It softened into a dense, misty shower of golden stardust, drifting down and melting into their skin. Amidst the dizzying, overwhelming rhythm of their passion, the once arrogant, untouchable alpha had completely red, rimmed eyes. Heavy tears splashed against Ethan's collarbone, catching the light like shattered diamonds. "Why are you so good to me, my love?" Lucas cried, even as he claimed him with desperate, overwhelming need. "Are you mine? Tell me you're mine?" Tilting his slender neck back, caught in the absolute crest of the wave, Ethan gently kissed away the tears at the corner of Lucas' eyes. "I'm yours. This is a reward for my brave, strong puppy." The next day, sunlight streamed through the floor to ceiling windows, casting warm, dappled light across the tangled sheets. Ethan slowly opened his eyes. The towering alpha beside him was still fast asleep. That stunning, usually intimidating face was currently buried in the pillow, the corners of his eyes still carrying a faint, soft flush from last night's tears. A tender smile tugged at the corners of Ethan's lips. He leaned in and pressed a gentle, lingering kiss to the tip of Lucas' nose. However, the quiet bliss didn't last long before Ethan ran into the very last person he wanted to see. Sitting on the leather sofa in the living room, Robert gripped a rosewood cane that was visibly trembling in his hands. "It's been so long, yet your manners seem to have completely regressed. You don't even know how to greet me." Robert let out a cold scoff, his eyes full of bitter, unwilling mockery. "To think the son I poured all my life's work into grooming ended up completely falling for a beta without even a functioning gland." A cold smirk curled on Ethan's lips. He met that gaze head on, refusing to back down an inch. Taking away his favorite companion, firing the nanny he was closest to, forbidding him to love, forbidding him to rely on anyone. "You call that grooming? That's breeding a puppet in captivity." Robert's face instantly turned ashen, the deep wrinkles on his cheeks twitching violently. "Emotions are the most useless things in this world. The only thing that matters is power and profit. And yet, the power and profit you pride yourself on couldn't defeat your overly emotional son, could it?" Ethan cut him off with icy precision. The air fell dead silent for 3 agonizing seconds. The layer of icy sharpness in Robert's eyes finally shattered. He leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking entirely defeated, and let out a heavy sigh. "I underestimated you. After you left, he went completely rogue and fought against me at every turn. In just a few years, he completely dismantled my entire hand. I'm old. I can't beat him anymore. But could you persuade him to come back and run the family empire? What future is there in clinging to that tiny, run-down subsidiary?" Before he could even finish his sentence, a broad, towering shadow crashed over them. "What are you doing here?" "Stay away from him." Lucas, who had woken up at some point, vaulted down the last of the stairs. Like a fierce beast fiercely guarding its treasure, he planted himself firmly in front of Ethan. A torrential, dark, golden aura exploded from beneath his feet in a brilliant, blinding wall of fire. The overwhelmingly dominant presence mercilessly forced Robert's bleak, gray shadow to retreat. Looking at the sun standing before him, bristling with absolute defense and hostility, Robert pressed his thin, withered lips together. Leaving behind a muttered, utterly lacking in decorum, he leaned heavily on his cane and hobbled away. As the heavy front door clicked shut, the volatile wall of dark golden fire was instantly extinguished. Lucas turned around, lingering fear etched into his features. He pulled Ethan into an inescapable, desperate embrace, pressing his chin firmly into the soft crook of Ethan's neck as if trying to merge their very existences. Under the stark, bright lights of the clinic, Noah, dressed in a pristine white coat, quickly scribbled his signature on a medical chart. A calm, crystal clear aura radiated gently from him. "It's a psychogenic condition. As long as he doesn't suffer any more severe emotional distress, his disorder is fully healing." Noah lifted his head, raising an inquisitive eyebrow at Ethan. "When did you get back? Want to grab dinner this weekend?" Cough, cough, cough. Lucas suddenly erupted into a fit of highly exaggerated, dramatic coughing. His protective dark golden aura flared up instantly, bristling like a territorial cat with countless sharp golden flares. He wrapped a deeply possessive arm around Ethan's waist, gritting his teeth. "My neck still hurts." Noah didn't even bother to lift his head, casually tapping his pen against the desk. "Out the door. Take a right. Orthopedics." Also, men who are always coughing like that usually don't have much stamina. "Ethan, are you sure you don't want to reconsider me?" The very next second, a visibly livid Lucas practically dragged Ethan by the wrist, fleeing the hospital as if running for their lives. Slam. The heavy car door shut tight. Inside the intimate enclosure of the cabin, the previously arrogant and untouchable Alpha was now burying his face pitifully into Ethan's lap. Baby, don't talk to him. A lovable, rosy flush crept onto the corners of Lucas' eyes, and his long, damp eyelashes fluttered restlessly against the palm of Ethan's hand. Don't, you know perfectly well if I have stamina or not. Baby, my rut still isn't over. Ethan let out a helpless sigh, running his fingers affectionately through the incredibly soft, short hair. I know. Go to the back seat. Not here. Lucas instantly perked up, clambering into the back, looking for all the world like a puppy wagging its tail. Just as Ethan reached over to buckle his seatbelt, the screen of his phone resting on the passenger seat lit up. It was 2 new text messages from Noah. Just a heads up for you. For the record, the rest of us alphas would never suddenly start calling someone baby just because we hit a rut. The pale light of the screen reflected in Ethan's eyes. He froze for a split second. Then, glancing at the rearview mirror, he saw the top, tier Alpha, clinging eagerly to the back of the driver's seat, his handsome face full of boundless, wide-eyed anticipation. Ethan couldn't hold it back, his lips curled into a helpless, incredibly soft smile. High-rise office building, the pantry. A few young Omega colleagues were huddled together, buzzing with excitement over their new CEO. What do you guys think, Mr. Lucas pheromones smell like? It has to be something intoxicating, like strong vodka. No way. I think it's a woody scent. Utter, absolute dominance. Standing quietly off to the side with his coffee mug, a flicker of pure amusement danced in Ethan's eyes. Actually, they were all wrong. A memory of the aftermath of one of their recent nights flashed softly through Ethan's mind. Tangled in the messy, comfortable sheets, the broad, shouldered, narrow, waisted, 6'2" Alpha was flushed a deep, beautiful red from head to toe. Amidst his stuttered, breathless confessions of love, that overwhelmingly powerful dark golden aura had miraculously transformed. It turned into crystal, clear, sweet, shimmering pink stardust, looking exactly like bubbly, fizzy strawberry soda. Who would have ever guessed that this fierce, intimidating wolf was actually strawberry, flavored on the inside? Ethan, what do you think? A colleague turned and asked curiously. Ethan swallowed his sip of coffee and answered with a perfectly straight face. Probably puppy, scented. Leaving his colleague staring in completely bewildered silence, Ethan picked up his document folders, smiling to himself as he pushed open the heavy wooden door of the CEO's office. He had barely taken a single step inside when a tremendous magnetic force suddenly yanked his wrist inward. The room spun beautifully, and Ethan found himself pressed deeply into the plush, oversized leather sofa. Baby, my sweet baby, my rut is here, Lucas whispered, completely unable to wait. His warm lips eagerly and tenderly sought the soft skin of Ethan's neck. Once again that hopelessly clingy, misty, gentle golden light bloomed around him, wrapping them in a cocoon of warmth. Ethan pushed a hand gently against that solid chest, raising a teasing eyebrow. Stop pretending. You've been fully cured for a while now. Besides, last night, did I not give you enough? Lucas froze. The corners of his eyes instantly drooped, and a soft, pitiful whine escaped his throat. Never enough. Ethan let out a bright, airy laugh. Unhurriedly, he unzipped the document folder in his hand, pulling out a genuine black leather choker encrusted with crushed diamonds. The delicate diamonds caught the overhead light, refracting a brilliant, breathtaking gleam. Click. A crisp sound echoed in the quiet room. The cool metal clasp locked flawlessly around the Alpha's neck, settling right over his subtly raised veins. The elegant black leather perfectly covered the faint, faded scar left behind from his painful past, claiming him entirely. Lucas' pupils dilated rapidly, the light shining within them bright enough to scorch. He reached up to touch the collar. The previously docile golden aura behind him was now practically wagging back and forth with frantic, joyous excitement, moving so fast it almost left tangible afterimages in the air. Thank you, my love. Can we now? We can. The moment the words left his lips, Ethan was swept entirely off his feet. Bursting with sheer elation, Lucas lifted him high, pushing open the hidden door to the private lounge with his shoulder. Resting his head against that broad, searing, hot shoulder, Ethan's eyes brimmed with an unconcealed, deeply affectionate smile. See? What top-tier alpha? At his core, he was just a fiercely loyal puppy. And Ethan, well, Ethan liked puppies the best.
The story ends here, and the ending is truly incredibly sweet. I absolutely love this kind of beautiful, two-way romance. Ethan is an exceptionally clear-headed, pragmatic, and emotionally strong beta. The hardships he faced growing up instilled in him a profound sense of self-protection and unbreakable personal boundaries. Even after developing genuine feelings for Lucas during their time together, he constantly reminded himself to stay grounded, strictly separating the alpha's needy dependency during his ruts from his coldness in reality. When the contract was unilaterally terminated and an Omega with an undeniably high compatibility match appeared, Ethan didn't cling or play the victim. He walked away without a single moment of hesitation. It wasn't that he didn't love Lucas, but he absolutely refused to lose himself just for the sake of loving someone else. At the same time, he is fiercely protective of those he holds dear. Once he was certain that Lucas truly loved him, and after uncovering the heartbreaking truth of Lucas' childhood trauma, he returned to his lover's side without a second thought. He fearlessly challenged Robert's toxic mindset, using his own unwavering tenderness and bravery to shield the man he loved. As for Lucas, his personality is filled with an extreme duality and intense devotion, a direct result of his deeply traumatic upbringing. Under his father's suffocating control of destroying anything he ever cared about, Lucas learned to use icy detachment as a flawless disguise. When sober, his harsh and distant treatment of Ethan, constantly emphasizing that he was just a tool, was actually a desperate, tragic defense mechanism to protect the person he cherished most from being ruined by his father. Yet, deep down, he remained a wounded soul, desperately yearning for affection. Once his rational mind collapsed during his ruts, he laid bare his breathtaking vulnerability, acting just like a devoted puppy, terrified of being abandoned. Ethan's departure became the ultimate catalyst that shattered his sanity. No longer holding back, he fought tooth and nail to overturn his family's entire empire, all just to win back his one and only salvation. Through their unwavering devotion, the two finally came together, and it is so easy to imagine the beautifully warm and happy life waiting for them. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to hit that subscribe button to our channel, and we'll see you in the next video.